Hi, Georgie.
Hi.
Hi. Hi, all. How are you? Yeah, looking good. All right. So, Georgie, can you please tell me a bit more about yourself so the public here kind of gets to know you in a minute or so?
Yeah, a minute, okay. Hi everyone, thanks so much for being here tonight. I'm Georgie Purcell and I'm obviously an Australian MP for the Animal Justice Party and really proud to be here and meet with my sister MPs. It's a very lonely job fighting for animals in Parliament and I do it on my own. I have no colleagues, so it's really inspiring to see what's been achieved here and what we can potentially do back home. But I got elected in November 2022 when I was 31 years old, and I'm the youngest woman in the Victorian Parliament. And with that comes many benefits and a lot of shit as well. Prior to getting elected to the Parliament, I had the great privilege of working as Chief of Staff to our first Victorian MP, Andy Meddick, and I've got my wonderful Chief of Staff, Danny, here as well, who worked with me in Andy's office. I've been involved in the animal protection movement for about 12 years now and have held various roles, and I guess what brought me to politics was working on the campaign to end puppy farms or puppy mills in Victoria, and we successfully got that done. And I remember sitting in the House of Parliament after years and years of campaigning when the legislation passed at like 1 a.m. after a marathon debate, and it's actually the House of Parliament that I sit in now, and I never thought I'd be there, and I just thought to myself, politics is how we change things for animals. And I got involved with the Animal Justice Party, never planned on being a politician myself, which I actually think is a good thing. If you really want to be a politician, you probably shouldn't be one. And, you know, I'm in Parliament until November 2026 and will likely recontest again, but 2 more years to get things done for animals until I have to think about that.
Wow. Thank you for that brief introduction, and there's a lot there to ask questions about. I don't even know where to start, but let's start. I think that's interesting because I can recognize a lot about what you said about not wanting to go into politics. Why didn't you want to go into politics in the first place?
Yeah, look, so I think a lot of people look at Australia and think that we're this really happy-go-lucky country of sort of bogans, but it's actually a deeply misogynistic country as well. And being a young woman in Parliament is, you know, quite difficult, especially when you're in a party that is naturally taking on industries and pursuits that are male-dominated, such as farming, shooting and racing, and they're the big patches that I work in. But also, it's sort of just not a place that was built for people like me. I obviously sort of don't look like a politician, and I guess have really challenged the status quo of what a politician should act like and should look like. But it's actually been really lovely as well, because by doing that, we've brought in, I think, a new audience. And I always said to myself that if I achieved nothing while I was in politics, which thankfully I have achieved things, but when I first got elected, I really just wanted to create a space where people who didn't feel represented or could see themselves in our political systems could look to someone and think, perhaps I could do that job as well. Because I always say, you know, you can't be what you can't see, and we make decisions every single day that affects all types of people, particularly young people who live with them those decisions the longest, but so often they don't have a seat at the table. So I guess that's why I was intimidated by the fact that I wasn't like the other people in there, but I also thought it was a really important reason why I should be in there as well. But it also took a lot of convincing from Bruce Poon. Yeah.
And Bruce is like this godfather of the animal justice movement, so he's a brilliant mind. So now you're in politics. Do you like it?
Yes, I do. It's a difficult job, and no one has sympathy for politicians, so you can't say that. But it's a hard job, and I think it's particularly a hard job when you go in there with a passion and a sense of justice, which so many politicians don't do, and they do it as a career, and that's not why I'm in there. Of course, I'll stay in Parliament as long as I can, because the longer I'm in there, the more I can be bringing about change for animals. But I enjoy it, but I also am weighed down by, I guess, the extent of animal suffering and the very slow progress. Like, we often feel that we are winning the public narrative and the social narrative, but the legislative change is so slow and so frustrating. And we always say in my office, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. So we always try and get what we can done, but there's always so much more to do. And I'm really hopeful that in the future we'll have not just me, with you know, there's so many issues that affect animals in Australia, just as there is around the world. But when there's basically a campaign or an organisation for every single species, and they all want outcomes, and rightly so, but it's a lot of work with a small team. And then, of course, you're doing all the other work that comes with being a politician as well, such as voting on legislation that isn't in your patch, but you have to be across it. So it is a lot of work. But, you know, we work hard every day and, you know, try and get things done.
Good. And you started politics because of animals and animal rights, right? But what triggered you to even think about animal rights? Because, you know, most of us are just thought that it's normal to kill animals.
Yeah, so I grew up in a really small country town. I mean, there's no point even telling you where it is because you're not from Australia. Normally I tell that story when I'm in Australia, but a very small country town, and it was largely an agricultural town. And I was 4 years old and I just watched Babe, and my parents were teaching me how to ride my bike down the highway, and I saw a truck full of pigs, and I asked my parents where they were going. And I'm so grateful for this. My parents were honest with me, which so often parents aren't, because they want to shield and protect their children from the reality of what's happening to animals. But they told me, and I just said very firmly, I don't want to do that anymore. And they said, okay. And I was vegetarian from a very young age, and I just really never lost that passion for wanting to improve the lives of animals. And then when I got older and I sort of became a bit radical at university, I was out doing a lot of direct action and protests and locking on and getting arrested, and and that's all great. There's a space in animal activism. I strongly believe that politics isn't the only thing we should be doing. We often talk about it like a pyramid, that there's activists and there's litigators and there's people doing outreach, and then there's the politicians. But I was studying law and I wanted to go into animal law, and I finished my degree, and there wasn't really many possibilities, but I thought, like, hey, I like politics, and I think it's a great tool for change. So I sort of shifted that focus and, you know, started working in that space. Although I was just saying before that I think it's really important that even if you become a politician, it's always important to remember that you are an activist first. So we go out on the wetlands every year for duck rescue, and I got arrested and banned this year from going out trying to stop the ducks being shot.
You got arrested?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's you get walked off the wetlands and by the enforcement team and given a fine, and then I was banned from all wetlands in Victoria. So, like, I couldn't go to, like, even a wetland to walk my dog because it would technically be illegal. But I think it's really important to show that, you know, politicians don't all have to be the same, and so often activism is our, you know, grassroots foundation of why we're doing the work that we're doing now. Yeah.
So what do we do today? I mean,
today.
When it comes to politicians doing something.
Yeah, so today we were out on the streets here. Obviously, there's a really big issue in Australia that many of you would be aware of, where hundreds of thousands of kangaroos every single year across the country are shot under the cover of darkness, and their skins are exported to countries all around Europe and the United States. And I'm very sorry to tell you this, but Australians don't give a shit about kangaroos. They see them as pests, you know, similar to introduced species, even though they are not just a native animal, but they're, to our First Nations people who are, you know, so wrongly done by in Australia, a very important animal to them as well, and a totem species. You know, they're treated with such disrespect and disdain, and we're working really hard back home to try and end that industry. but it's an uphill battle with Australian politicians because the kangaroo industry has been so successful at demonising them. So we know the solution is you guys, and if we can stop the export of their skins, it makes the industry unviable. So we were out on the streets today with Esther as well, calling on people to sign their names on to getting, I can't remember the names of the places, we don't have them at home. No, the names of the two stores.
Oh yeah, the Intersport and Decathlon.
Yeah. We don't have them in Australia. But we know that if we can kill the export market, it will stop the industry at home, which is honestly awful. I live in an area where kangaroos are shot. I actually represent a regional area, an agricultural area, which is very interesting and comes with its challenges. But it's something that Australians don't even know is happening. And so often people will move out to the country and think they're going to have this beautiful life, and then they wake up in the night to kangaroos being shot in the back paddock. Wow. And it's becoming a human safety issue as well. And we get a lot of people who are really upset about it.
All right.
So we're hoping if we can stop it here, we can stop it back home.
Good. Because it's good to know that the European Union is the biggest importer of kangaroo products.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And we actually don't really use the skins in Australia. They're largely exported. And only recently a kangaroo shooter, a commercial kangaroo shooter, so who gets paid to do that for a job, said the export market is dying. So they know that. We just need to nip it in the bud and, end it all together and ideally legislate it.
Yeah, put the pressure on. You're going to hand over a manifest or a note or a call to action to Parliament tomorrow, right?
That's right, yeah. So we're going to the Parliament with a briefing note which covers off all the issues in the kangaroo industry and particularly the First Nations perspective as well, which is really, really important to say it's time to stop importing skins from our native animals. And it's really interesting because the Australian government uses kangaroos to try and bring tourists into the country, and people come to Australia to see kangaroos, and then they get there and they're horrified by how we're treating them. People just have no idea, and it's because the industry is so deceptive, and we're working really hard to change that. And I know Dennis is in the room, who is also working really hard with Kangaroos Alive to do the same.
Yeah, who here knew that we are one of the biggest importers of kangaroo products? Yeah, like this is it, right? People just don't know.
Yeah, that's right.
That's the thing. So thank you for coming and telling that story for the kangaroos. We'll do our best here as well. There was a motion passed, as you know, some time ago in Parliament to stop this, to plead in the European Union to stop this import. But we're kind of stuck because they are now focusing on the animal welfare of the shooting. I was like, no, just stop the import.
Well, this is the thing about you can't fix the problems in the kangaroo shooting industry because they are large animals, and so often they are wounded but not killed, which I work really closely with wildlife rescuers in my electorate. We have so many incredible wildlife carers and shelters, and they are bringing in animals quite regularly who have gunshot wounds, who have been shot for the purposes of their skins and their meat, but haven't been fatally wounded. So they often live with these injuries for days or weeks on end. If they're lucky, they'll go into care and be rehabilitated, and if not, they'll be euthanised by volunteers, not the shooters themselves. They let them hop away with their injuries. But perhaps what's most tragic about this industry is it orphans a lot of joeys, and the recommended form of dispatch by the kangaroo shooting industry is blunt force trauma, and many shooters will pick them up by the legs and hit them over a tow bar of their car, and we're actually finding that even some kangaroo shooters won't do that, so they'll hand them over to wildlife carers, and these wildlife carers will spend up to a year or even 2 years, depending how old they are, caring for these animals with their own money and heaps of time, and then they'll release them back out into the wild and they'll be shot.
Wow.
And it's just dreadful. Kangaroos are not really protected anywhere in Australia.
Yeah. I'll come back to the topic of animal rescue because I think there's a positive thing to say about that. Yeah. So you can tell me a bit more about that. But I just wanted to tackle this one issue which really surprised me. I was when I heard this, I was like, wow,
Is it the
you are
cats?
really barbaric right there.
It's a cat, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Could you tell me, like, you have cats as well, right?
I've got 4 cats.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe tell me about your cats and then what you in Australia do with those
If
cats.
I tell you about my cats, we're going to be here till the Q&A ends, so I'll keep it brief. So I've got 4 cats. One Stanford, Alice, Kitty, really original, and Clementine. And yeah, they're my little babies. I live by myself. I have a pet sitter at the moment to be here, and Stanford, he's you shouldn't have favourites, but he's my favourite. I've had him since I was 19, so he's been with me for a really long time. But Australia, you want me to go into this now?
Oh, yes, please.
Yeah.
People should hear this because
yeah.
I was really surprised.
So Australia really, just like kangaroos, demonises cats, and we do have a lot of cats that are what we call them semi-owned, or community cats, which means they don't really have a set owner, but they'll often, live on a street where multiple people will care for them, and but they're not microchipped or anything like that. And trap, neuter, return is illegal in Australia. It's completely illegal. And we have activists that go out and do that and risk what can come with it, but the government just won't accept the science that the best thing that you can do to reduce cat populations is to stop them from breeding. So instead they let them breed and shoot them. Or recently we have this development where the government has made AI robots where a cat will walk into a box, the box will identify they're a cat, and then they'll spray them in the face with poison. It's an awful poison. You guys might not even know it exists because it's illegal here. It's called 1080 poison, and it's illegal everywhere around the world except for Australia and New Zealand. It was actually made as a war tool to poison people and to kill people, and they decided it was even too dangerous for that, but we use it on our animals in Australia. But positive to it, yes. By me being in Parliament, we've got them banned in the state that I live in.
Right.
So
Applause, please.
So the cats aren't being sprayed in the face with poison where I sit in Parliament, but they are in other parts around Australia. And it was just really interesting coming here because we're doing research on just some of the advancements that have been made in the Netherlands. And Danny actually texted me and was like, mate, they have ropes going down into the canals so if the cats fall in, they can climb out. And it's just like, here we spray them in the face with poison. Like, it's awful. But we're trying to do as much as we can to change the conversation on cats. But the government is intent on this narrative that they kill our native wildlife, when they're killing our native wildlife first of all, but we know the biggest threat to the animals that cats are killing is actually habitat destruction and land clearing for agriculture.
Yeah.
But they don't want to have that conversation, but we're trying to make them.
So glad you're there. And of course, this also shows that it's so important to have a party for the animals in every country.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Because also these ropes, I think it was fixed by our local party here, so it was really nice.
It's cool.
I think one of the members who was, she's now a member of Parliament, Christine, can you stand up?
Yeah.
She's our member of Parliament
Thanks,
also.
Christine, for doing that.
She's shy. But
so lovely.
She also fixed it here in the municipality, I think. So over to some good stuff. You have fixed some millions of Australian dollars for the wildlife rescue, right?
Yeah, that's right.
How did you do that?
So we have every single year what's called a budget that's handed down, which I think you have the equivalent of the other day.
Prinsjesdag, miljoenennota, yeah.
Yeah, that.
Yeah.
And in it, we are able to submit, bids or applications for what we want money for animals. So even though I'm not in the government, I'm in a really unique situation that the House of Parliament that I sit in, the government doesn't have a majority. So in order to pass any of their legislation, they need 6 more votes, and they often rely on me in order to pass their legislation. So that means that we have quite a bit of bargaining power and pull when it comes to getting outcomes for animals, and one of those things is financial support for the people who are caring for animals. So we've got millions of dollars in funding for various shelters and carers around Victoria who are taking in all sorts of orphaned native animals, from bats to wombats. A lot of people here don't seem to know wombats, but they're like my favourite. They're like my favourite Australian native animal. Kangaroos, you know, echidnas, all sorts of animals. So they actually receive no other government support otherwise. So completely volunteer run, volunteer funded. I went out on a drive along with an ambulance service in Amsterdam the other day. We have nothing like that in Australia. So we've got some funding, but we really hope to, instead of every single year throwing bits of money at different groups, we want to make it a universal support system so everyone gets supported to do that work, because it's a community service.
Really nice.
Yeah.
That's good. Yeah, so you went along with the animal ambulance here in the Netherlands.
Yes.
Yeah.
I got to rescue a pigeon, which was very exciting for me, because the other thing I've really noticed about here is people are so nice to pigeons, and they're not nice to pigeons in Australia. And every single year back at home we have this competition called the Bird of the Year, and the whole country gets into it. And normally the bird that wins is like some really niche, like specific, really beautiful bird. And I've tried to make it the pigeon like a few times, unsuccessfully. But we have really tried to do a bit of work back home to, you know, get people to treat pigeons with kindness. And coming here and seeing people call an ambulance for a pigeon, like that is just like something that would never happen. So we went out with them and picked up this pigeon who had been, we think, attacked by perhaps a dog, and dropped them off to the vet. And then we got to rescue some seagulls as well. Although they did rescue 2 hedgehogs today, and I was really hoping to see a hedgehog. So, you know, but next time.
Definitely. That's good to hear. So you're coming back one day as well. Yeah. So you've touched upon the issue of obviously you're the youngest in Parliament. And being a woman, and then you getting different reactions. You've been quite outspoken on different topics, and you've gotten some negative and positive reaction. Can you tell me more about the feedback that you get from the audience, let's say?
Yeah. So I guess something that I really learnt when I was embarking on my political journey is that if you're not honest about who you are, someone will be honest about who you are for you. So which is unfortunate, because it shouldn't be that way, but I've always been very open about who I am. So the fact that when I was at university, I was working as a stripper, and perhaps things about me that that you wouldn't expect in a politician, and which honestly, as I said, often when you say you can't be what you can't see, when I came out with that story, when I was being a candidate, I felt like the loneliest that I'd probably ever felt in my life, and then immediately was surrounded by people who were like, thank you, because me too, and I don't talk about it as well. But with that, and being open about who you are and being unashamed about who you are, comes with, I guess, a lot of people with opinions about it, and coupled with the combination of taking on or threatening the pursuits of blokes who, you know, do awful things to animals. So I guess one period for me that was particularly challenging was we had a parliamentary inquiry into duck shooting in Victoria, which I just spoke about. It's when we have an open season on our native ducks every year, and we worked really, really hard to get that inquiry. Banning duck shooting was one of the main reasons I wanted to get elected to Parliament. And the second that those guys, even though there's so few of them, really, really dwindling group of people, the second that they felt under threat, they took it out on me. And just in a way that wouldn't happen to another politician. So, you know, they were photoshopping pictures of my face under someone being shot. I've had death threats. I had, a bow hunter message me the other day saying he can't wait to meet me. It's going to end my life. It's not funny. I have that thing where I laugh about things that are slightly uncomfortable. But I think it's really important to call it out because we've done so much work back home to make politics and the physical parliament building a safe place for women, and I genuinely can see that and feel that change. But the place where I feel most at risk every single day, I have it in my pocket or my handbag, which is my phone. And the online world is a really emerging threat. Obviously, at the start of this year, it went all around the world. Like, I got photoshopped as well in the news. They gave me bigger boobs and like abs, and took the tattoos off my stomach. So just things that sort of are new threats that are happening, I guess, as this younger cohort comes through our political systems, that might not be the cookie cutter politician, and how we deal with those. And I think I'm probably at the time where that conversation is starting, so having to lead it a little bit. But I will say, I've been in Amsterdam or the Netherlands for a week now, and I call out the way I get treated a lot. But in the time I've been here, I've had 3 people in another country stop me who follow me on Instagram just out on the street. And so social media can be also a really, really powerful tool to connect and to bring about change as well.
Nice. And how do you stay strong in such a situation? What gives you the positive vibes to move on and just say, never mind, we'll go forward? Yeah,
look, I get asked this question all the time. And I think my answer so often is, it's ever changing how I stay positive. And, I think so often being in a room like this tonight and seeing that I can come to literally the other side of the world and sit in a room of like-minded people who all want the same thing, who all want a kinder world for animals, even though we might be fighting like the hardest battles every single day, that we have the support of each other, but also that our movement is growing. Like, I remember even 12 years ago when I was starting out in activism, we wouldn't get this many people in a room. We wouldn't have members of parliament for animals. I remember when I first joined the Animal Justice Party, they were trying to get to 50 members, and now we have thousands of members. I never thought we'd get politicians, and now I am one myself. So it's surrounding myself with like-minded people. It's also seeing the progress, even when it's not local, but coming here and meeting you and seeing the things that are happening in other countries and what we can potentially achieve as well. And it also sounds very cliche, but I have quite a few animals myself. So I've got my 4 cats, and then I've got my 3 dogs, and then I've got my 3 horses, and I've got my 15 sheep. And they give me hope as well, because they're the perfect, I guess, combination of, they help me switch off when I go and spend time with them, but they also remind me with their lives and their own autonomy of the lives that I want for all animals. So reminds me to keep on fighting.
Yeah, I can recognize that. Yeah, this is giving me also more hope and more energy to fight again tomorrow in any kind of debate. Maybe you can tell me more about, because I read about the duck shooting, duck hunting that you've been fighting, and greyhound dogs races, and pig welfare issues. What are you most proud of? Maybe you can elaborate on that.
So one of the things I'm most proud of recently is we had a horrific investigation by undercover investigators in Australia, in the state that I live in, of 3 slaughterhouses where pigs were being stunned with CO2 gas, which is pretty routine procedure around the world, and so many people aren't aware that it's happening. So the footage was so horrific that we were able to establish a parliamentary inquiry out of it, which coincidentally goes to the committee that I chair. So I got to chair the inquiry, and we got a number of really great recommendations out of it. So sow stalls, farrowing crates, gestation crates, none of those are illegal in Australia. So it recommends to end those, to end blunt force trauma, for pain relief, for routine procedures such as ear notching, tail docking and teeth clipping. So that's probably the most recent thing that I'm proud of, and the government has to respond in 3 months. Yeah, but also heaps of work in the greyhound space. Greyhound racing is, like, Australia loves animal racing.
Yeah.
So coming to places like here where it's not really a thing is really interesting. We get a public holiday for a horse race. So we're fighting really hard to end greyhound racing, and horse racing is much bigger, but we're taking that on as well.
Good to hear.
Yeah.
Great. I just want to go back to the public here, because I'm sure there are many people who want to ask you a lot of questions. I have a lot of more, but I want to give these people the opportunity to ask you questions. So I'll give over the mic to our lovely moderator.
So I want to open the floor.
You're a parliament member of one state. Are there parliament members of Party of the Elements in other states, and do you help each other or learn from each other? You know?
It's a good question, because our political system is quite different to yours, and I've been trying to learn it while I'm here. But I represent my state, and then we have a national parliament as well. But for me, being in state parliament was what I wanted to do, because most of the legislation that affects animals is governed at a state level. So I have a colleague in New South Wales, which is the state over the border. Her name's Emma Hurst, and she's doing some really, really amazing work as well. And formerly we had 2 other MPs, Andy Medic, who was in Victoria, and Mark Pearson, who was in New South Wales. We're having an election in Western Australia soon, and we're pretty sure we'll get one there. And then we have a federal election coming up, which is a national election, and we're a decent chance to get one there. So right now I only have one colleague, but at a local government level, which I guess you call them, it's like the lower, it's like, yeah, I mean, yes, we have a number of those as well. Yeah. So we're growing. We're not quite as advanced as you are here, but we are growing. Yeah.
Thank you so much for everything that you're doing. I think you're a great example to young women in politics who may not look like politicians. So that's really great. Yeah. Feel a kinship. You were telling us earlier that it's sometimes hard to kind of, that you also have to keep going with the legislations that is not necessarily your core work. So how do you keep focus on the things you need to be doing when you're also still doing all the other legislation that you still have to vote for, make time for, read, make all these decisions? I sometimes find it very hard to not get lost in that and still focus on the things that we're here for.
Yeah, it's a really great question, and it's certainly something that I haven't perfected or mastered, but I think it's really important. I mean, first of all, to not look like a dickhead, right? If you get stopped by a journalist and asked about a bill that's coming up before Parliament and you don't know what's happening. But I'm really lucky that I have a great team of staff. So it's me and 5 others, and it's still small based on our workload, but because everyone's so dedicated and passionate to the work, we're really good at divvying that work off, and we really do it based on, I guess, interests and expertise. For me as well, chairing a parliamentary committee adds another layer of work, because I'm often chairing parliamentary inquiries into areas that are not in the animal welfare space at all, but the trade-off is my committee gets animal welfare references, so when they do come up I get to chair those. So I'm pulled from every direction, and then it's compounded by the fact that the electorate that I represent is, it takes 8 hours to drive across. So I'm often travelling like a long way for work when we're not in Parliament. But I guess I'm driven by the Animal Justice Party's values of kindness, equality, rationality and non-violence. And I presume you have, I guess, a similar set of values here. And when a piece of legislation that is coming up that I know really affects the lives of people, or perhaps could be an injustice, that's when I'll put more into it. And I work alongside community advocacy groups who often guide me in that space. And I think it's really important as a politician. A lot of people go into politics because I think they're an expert in everything, but I actually really think the job of a politician is to listen and to be guided by the people who actually do know, and importantly, the people with lived experience and are affected by those issues. So I receive a lot of advice from people like that. And then, on top of that, in the animal space, I honestly couldn't do my job without the volunteers who are, I used to be one, with all the different groups and advocacy organisations who are out there every single day on the streets, doing investigations, doing research, litigating in the courts, working for animals and getting paid for it is such a privilege, and I absolutely don't take it for granted, and it's so often the volunteers that are helping me getting my work done. So I guess it's a bit of a team effort, and I couldn't do it without the support of the many people around me and being guided by their advice.
You've been talking, for example, about how you don't really fit the usual image of a politician, and how that's come with certain hardships. I work at a regional parliament that is very conservative, and as a non-binary person, I tend to stick out as a sore thumb. So I'm just wondering, are there any advantages that it has given you?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think first of all, that would be really difficult. I first of all want to acknowledge that, and I hope your presence is helping to change things. So often these changes need to be led by people who are affected, by, I guess, the certain forms of discrimination that we receive, and I get it in different ways. But I think being different to politics, even though it comes with a whole lot of negative commentary, that negative commentary has helped me bring in a whole community of people that I just never expected. And so often when you speak up about your experiences, you realise that you're absolutely not alone, like I've said. And with a new cohort and a new group and a new generation entering political systems, so much of the things that I thought would hold me back or stop me from being a politician are going to become the new normal, and I just think we needed someone to help normalise them, like being scared of our digital footprints or the things we did when we were younger, and all the things that all politicians have done, except they just didn't have Instagram or they just didn't have Facebook. So I really feel like I'm weighed down often by the treatment that I receive, but I'm also so often lifted up by the countless amount of people who reach out to me and say, your presence means something to me, which is honestly I never thought would be a position that I would be in. So I really, it's such a privilege. Yeah.
What I'm curious about is that sometimes people in the Netherlands or other smaller European countries tend to forget is how huge Australia and already your state of Victoria is. You just told us that it takes 8 hours to drive across. And then you're already not even on a national level. How do you keep track of, for example, cases of animal abuse? In the Netherlands, of course, our country is not that big. Then we have the different regions, the provinces, and then the municipalities. So it's a bit still sometimes we don't see things that are happening, but I can imagine that's such more difficult in Australia as well. How do you manage to not oversee cases of extreme animal abuse, for example? Yeah,
that is honestly something that I had never really thought about now until you asked me it. And I guess being here, I've just actually had a light bulb moment when you said that. And I think part of the reason why Australia is getting away with our awful treatment of animals is by the very fact that the country is so bloody big that it's easy to hide, right? Animal abuse happens in areas that are remote, regional, closed off, and very insular small communities. And then, of course, the kangaroo shooting industry happening in the darkness in regional areas in a way that's impossible to monitor and track. We do our best to keep on top of that. And again, similar to my answer before, if it wasn't for the work of so many volunteers and undercover investigators who I work really closely with, it would be absolutely an impossible task. And what we're starting to see as our movement grows and becomes bigger and bigger, and we are exposing it despite all odds, the government is fighting back. So the state that I'm in and that I represent is one of the only states that hasn't implemented full ag-gag laws to try and stop investigators documenting animal cruelty, and we fought back against those. You know, the farming industry is essentially trying to get new forms of trespass with harsher penalties just on animal activists to stop them coming onto their property. So it is a whole, I guess, something that is unique to Australia is our investigators like us so often driving and travelling hours and hours and hours between states in a way that probably doesn't happen here. And the other big thing that impacts us back home just based on our sheer size is actually the animal rescue work. So I work really closely with wildlife rescuers, and it is not uncommon for them to drive literally hours to an animal who is injured on the road only for them to get there and have to euthanize them and then drive back home and then receive no support from the government. So our size is certainly such a big challenge that I guess I'd never really thought about before until coming here and seeing like a smaller place with, you know, a lot of people, but I guess similar challenges but in a different way, and it's hard, it makes it harder to hide, whereas Australia, it's very, very easy to get away with this cruelty, which is a challenge. So it doesn't fully answer your question, but I hope that helps. Yeah.
Well, thank you. And if I may, I also wonder if what you bring back home, what you learned from here, what do you bring back home to Australia?
Yeah, I guess a few things. So part of the reason that I'm here on top of the kangaroo campaign is, like I've just spoken about, is we are working really hard on trying to reduce wildlife road strike, which is a growing challenge for us in Australia. So 10 million native animals are killed on our roads every year, and that only continues to grow because we're developing more and more land and destroying habitat, so more native animals are being forced out into areas where they wouldn't normally go, which disperses them onto roads. And when I was looking into this, I thought we should have a parliamentary inquiry. So we've secured that parliamentary inquiry that starts next year. And we were looking at countries that had done work in this space to reduce wildlife road strike. And one of the best was the Netherlands. And I think there's so many things happening here that people who live here wouldn't realise is like incredible to us. So I walked over an eco-duct the other day. We don't have those in Australia. We don't have any wildlife crossings. We don't have any wildlife underpasses. We don't have any of the technology that warns you to slow down, nothing like that. And as a result, our animals are being absolutely decimated on the roads. So I think one of the things that I'm taking away is that it is possible to make small changes for animals that mean really, really big things, and you know those big things can progress even further from there. So I think I'm leaving with like a whole lot of inspiration and hope for potentially improving the lives of animals in Australia.
It's great to have you here, and it's so great to see that there are also members of representatives in Australia as well. And we know that there are lots of countries where they're trying to start a party for animal welfare as well worldwide. I'm, for instance, in Romania, they're trying to start a political party as well. And I was wondering, because we're going to try to spread the word not only here today in this room, but also again with the social media to try to have this event spread as well. If you can give them a hopeful message to start and to continue to as well fight in countries like Romania, but also in Lebanon or in Egypt or in Morocco, where we have, as an Animal Politics Foundation, lots of contact, and I think it would be great to hear your message to them.
Yeah, the movement for animal justice is a global one, and we can't look at it from a local perspective. We can't look at it from the way that we just do things at home. It's about the way that we work together, and we are so much stronger together, and we become a louder voice that is impossible to ignore. So the more people around the world who can do this work and are able to do this work, even though it can feel like really, really hard and really, really challenging at the start, which it was for us in Australia at one point. I never thought that I would be here today as a Member of Parliament for animals. That just seemed completely outrageous to me only a number of years ago, and it's happening. So the more of us that join together, we become a powerful force for good and a louder voice for good, and can achieve really, really big things as a global movement around the world.
I just wonder how the native Australians view your work.
So something that is, I guess, a real privilege of my job is working with a bunch of different communities, as I've said, and something that I touched on, that I think it's important to not be an expert in everything and to listen to the voices of others. Something that is so deeply important to me is listening to the voices of First Nations people. Australia has an absolutely rotten history, and the colonisation is still so evident today, and are so often shown in the way that we treat animals. And I work back home with a number of different representative groups on my issues that they also deeply care about. So when it comes to native animals, I've worked with First Nations groups on the issue of duck shooting, on kangaroo shooting. Right now we're in a national conversation about dingoes, which I know there's a really similar example here with the wolves. So we're dealing with that back home, where First Nations groups are saying this is an animal that has deep cultural significance to us, and you're killing them for profit, and the government isn't listening. So it's really important that I do. So we work together, where we can and where we align, and not just in the animal welfare space. I've also recently been working with First Nations legal centres on laws to stop. We have a big issue of locking up Aboriginal children in Australia, and criminalising public drunkenness, which disproportionately impacts First Nations people as well, because of the disadvantage that they experience in our country. So, I obviously can't speak on behalf of all First Nations people, and of course they're not all the same, but we are working towards all the different groups, don't always have the same opinion, but we're actually working towards treaty in Victoria, which I'll have the opportunity to vote on. So we have a First Peoples Assembly as well, which is essentially like a House of Parliament that is the voices of our First Nations community. So there's work going on, but it's slow back home, but so often actually does relate to our animal issues, and we work together with them, and importantly are guided by their voice on it.
You said before that you work a lot with other politicians and they need your help sometimes.
Yeah.
Did you ever make a concession that you were not happy with?
Oh, that is a really good question. Look, I don't think I've ever made a concession that I wasn't happy with. I think probably for me, my biggest regrets are not putting pressure on as much as I could in times where it was vital. And it's always a delicate balance for me, because I'm needed, but if I'm too much of a pain in the ass, I'll try and find someone else. So it's trying to keep those relationships while pushing my issues along. One particular area where my relationship with the government became really, really, really strained was when they didn't ban duck shooting after a parliamentary inquiry recommended that they do so. And I basically shut myself off from working with them for some time, and I don't regret that. But the reality of, because I had to send a message, but the reality of being a politician is that I did have to come back to the table at some point. But I certainly think that there are times where I could hold out for longer in order to try and draw more out of them. But it's just, if you do it for too long, then you're tossed to the side completely. So yeah, it's always a judgment call. But certainly what I would say is that I have voted on a number of bills that I absolutely thought weren't perfect, but they did some good things, but also did some bad things. And you're often caught up in a space where if you don't support it, you're going to be responsible for the good things not going through the parliament as well, which is it's a real ethical dilemma, like a real ethical dilemma. And recently we had a really long debate on a youth justice bill, which I just touched on, about, how we're going to deal with the way that we treat youth in our criminal justice system. And the bill did some really, really bad things, but it also raised the age of criminal responsibility in Victoria, which was 10, and it moved it up to 12. And I knew that if I didn't support the bill, I would be responsible for keeping it at 10. So it's more those ethical dilemmas that I struggle with. Yeah.
A thing that I'm experiencing in my political work, and I'm just curious how you think about this, and I think it's a bit related to the previous question, but for example, I have some colleagues who I know like to hunt in their spare time as well, and I find it so difficult. Like, I know that some people, some politicians don't want to work with certain parties, for example, because they're very racist, but like, we are the party for the animals, so people who are actually hunters, it's for me, it's sometimes such a dilemma. Like, how do you deal with that? What's your experience with this?
Yeah, do you know what? I think politics has really taught me a form of pragmatism that's slightly unhealthy, because I fully get it. Like, I have colleagues who I fundamentally disagree with almost everything that they stand for, and I will debate them and fight them in the parliament. But I think it's really important doing this job that you're able to be a negotiator, you're able to be someone that builds relationships, and something that all representatives would know. So often the progress for animals actually doesn't happen on the floor of the parliament. It happens in meeting rooms, and it happens behind closed doors. And you can't bring about that change unless you're at least talking to people. And that doesn't mean that you are complicit in their views, or that you're supporting problematic things that they are saying or doing. It just means that you're finding common ground to work together. So I have a Shooters, Fishers and Farmers colleague. That's our party there, and we actually get along quite well. Not in the parliament, but in the office area, because he's not he doesn't shoot animals. He cares about the right to carry guns, and I've made peace with that, despite what he represents publicly. And then we align on a number of issues that affect animals. So he wants to ban the cat spraying poison, and if I could work with him to do that, then I will do that. But it's I think it's always sort of an individual judgment test, because we're having a real rise of the far right in Australia as well, and I think it's important to not be allowing that to go on by your political associations and your colleagues, but also accepting the reality of the people you share the room with and the limited time you have to get work done, and finding common ground where you can. So that's what I try and do. But of course, I have a little block of colleagues that I mostly work with, which is the Greens Party and the Legalised Cannabis Party, because cannabis it's so illegal in Australia that we even have politicians to try and change that. So we work together in supporting each other to advance our issues, which works really well, because we make up 7 and the government needs 6 votes. So we sort of hold that block and exclude everyone else out. Yeah.